Thank you very much, and welcome to Cats and Dogs here on Press TV with me, Len Potopic, where we start with a dreaming president who's living in a nightmare. Now, often politicians facing a mountain of problems will desperately seek some valley of distraction to divert attention. With crazy inflation and high prices choking the poor, Joe Biden could laser focus himself on solving the problems, as would most presidents. But let's be honest, for Sleepy Joe, the time and energy needed to do that just isn't really available, is it? Oh no. How about some novel solution? Like outsourcing the US manufacturing to a competent third party that can make America great again. Okay, then there are just two options. Trump or China. And it seems they prefer the dragon over Don. China isn't so beautiful. It really isn't. Okay, this approach does make one economy great again, but it's China's economy. Now, Biden might as well finish the job by simply renting the White House to the man that built and rebuilt America, President Xi Jinping. There is, of course, a familiar third option that US presidents often rely on when things get hot at home. Invade and conquer some country on the other side of the world. Since they already own Britain and it's going bust anyway, that's out. But recently, US Special Envoy for Iran, Robert Malley, said Joe Biden could take a military option against Iran to stop it, in his words, from acquiring a nuclear weapon in case sanctions and diplomacy fail. What? In case sanctions and diplomacy fail? That's a change of plan. In Afghanistan, the US first invaded, second retreated, third negotiated, and finally imposed sanctions. Then in Iraq, the US began with sanctions, then invaded, and is now moving on to diplomacy. So is leaving the invasion of Iran for last a new era for Washington? What's happened to the Americans? Well, for over a decade, the US has repeatedly considered military strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Since peanut-loving President Carter's administration, all options have been on the table. What about Biden? I tell Tehran I'm totally prepared to invade their country, comma, and if that doesn't work, comma, I'll be totally prepared to withdraw from it too, full stop. That's an approach we've used before, comma, and we'll do it again, end of quote. Why hasn't he done it already? Well, the stakes are really high, and it's safer to saber rattle than to actually do the invading. What does history tell us? What would previous presidents do? Here's what our Cats and Dogs Research Unit thinks past US Supremos might say about Iran. George Bush Sr. Heck, I could never tell old Iraq from Iran. George W. Bush Jr. My dad says we already conquered Iran or Iraq or something. But I don't know, because my geography's not that good, and hey, I've never been to South America anyways. Bill Clinton. I did not have military relations with that nation. Barack Obama. On our Middle East policy, can we fix it? No, we can't. Donald Trump. I've got so very, very much in common with that guy in Tehran. Washington hates us both. Joe Biden. I'm prepared to... Meanwhile, the UK also seems to be taking its lead from Sleepy Joe, because the whole of Britain is about to go to bed and stay there. Facing even more cost of living protests, the UK government could bring in controversial measures ranging from army deployment to oppressive new laws, as tens of thousands of workers could strike for better living standards, even though the Prime Minister says now is not the time to strike, adding it is completely unacceptable. People are having their lives disrupted by a selfish minority who join illegal protests. But hold on, isn't this the same Sunak who encouraged Iranian protesters to take to the streets to demand rights? Could he possibly be accused of hypocrisy? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Cats and Dogs phone line the Prime Minister himself, Rishi Sunak. Mr. Sunak, thanks for coming on to Cats and Dogs today.
Well, you are setting a good example to the rest of Britain.
A good example in what way?
We're not on strike.
Ah, right. Actually, on that point, you've given the green light to the police for a crackdown on protesters, haven't you?
It's not called a crackdown. I'm acting decisively to end the disruption caused to ordinary families.
So, what's a crackdown then?
It is acting decisively to end the disruption caused to ordinary families in other countries.
So you're saying the only difference between not a crackdown and a crackdown is if it happens in this country or in another country?
Basically, yes.
Isn't that, with respect, hypocrisy?
No, it's not hypocrisy if I'm criticizing it when it's happening somewhere else.
But, Prime Minister, you can't see anything wrong with what looks like different rules for you and then for the rest of the world?
No.
Are you anti-protest then when it comes to, well, the United Kingdom?
Look, we're not anti-protest. We're anti-a-selfish minority.
Well, how do you know they're even a minority?
Because we have arrested the majority, and now there's only a minority of protesters left. The rest of them are in police custody.
Will anything stop your crackdown?
It's not a crackdown when it's happening in Britain.
All right. Will anything stop you arresting the protesters?
Yes. One thing.
What's that one thing?
If the police go on strike as well.
What will you do then?
Blame Liz Truss.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. Meanwhile, The Independent published an article titled "People Eating Pet Food and Heating Meals with Candles Due to the Cost of Living," causing further protests and anger amongst pets. Meanwhile, a former aide to the late Queen Elizabeth II resigned after asking a British-born charity CEO where she was really from. She wrote on Twitter that the royal aide had repeatedly asked her, "What part of Africa are you from?" at an event hosted by King Charles's wife, Camilla. Supporters say Lady Susan Hussey, aged 83, dedicated her life to the royal family and is heartbroken, and it's not acceptable to make her feel that way. Critics say highlighting her age is ageism. Others argue that Lady Susan's precise question, "What part of Africa are you from?" has nothing to do with racism, but as a woman, she should have known better, causing these people to be accused of sexism. Still others say she should have known better because she's posh, causing accusations of classism. Union chiefs say the only way to resolve this dispute is with a stop on work through strike action. But unfortunately, rich, sexist, racist, classist people only have one union, the Tory party. And as far as anyone can tell, they stopped working years ago. That's all for this time. Join me again next time to find out who's been protesting, who's been arrested, and who's being offended. That's all on Press TV with me, Lemon Topic, and Cats and Dogs.